Hi, everybody. Happy Rambam Daily Mitzvah Learning. So we are going to finish up the Rambam before he starts listing out his mitzvahs. He says 14 kind of rules that he gives to decide which of the mitzvahs are mitzvahs, because again, the Chumash, the Torah doesn't give numbers. It's up to us or to the wise ones to decide which are the actual 613. And so Rambam is going to continue listing his guidelines. And then tomorrow we'll actually start the mitzvah. So we're up to number 10. Do not count a preparatory act as an independent mitzvah. Kind of like the introduction. For example, it says in the pasuk in Vayikra, you shall take fine flour and bake it into 12 loaves. So there's a mitzvah to bake the lechem hapanim, the 12 loaves of bread for the Mishkan or for the Beis HaMikdash. Prior to that, you need to take flour and do this, this, and that. That's not considered a separate mitzvah. The mitzvah is to bake the 12 loaves. There might be things, very often things that you're going to have to do in preparation for that as part of it, and Torah might even spell that out, but it's not considered its own mitzvah. Another example is command the children of Israel, and they shall take to you pure olive oil. The mitzvah is to burn the oil, to take the oil, to prepare the oil, but you're not going to include every step of the way, pulling it off the trees and crushing it and whatever. All of those pieces that come along with it are part of the one mitzvah as a whole. Okay. Principle number 11, the next one. If a mitzvah is comprised of a number of elements, do not count them separately. Here we have a very specific example. There's a mitzvah called the Arba Minim, the four species, and that's the lulav and esrog and hadassim and arabos, right? It's not four separate mitzvahs. It's one mitzvah. The Torah says specifically each part of the mitzvah, but as a whole, it's one mitzvah. Another example, I had another example. It's not listed here, so I forgot it. We're going to continue. If I think of it, I'll add it. Principle number 12. I think all of these are very logical, but Rambam is going to spell them all out. And oftentimes, as he teaches a mitzvah, he'll reference why he says this is the mitzvah, why he says this isn't a mitzvah, based on these 14 principles. So everything will be accounted for. Number 12. When commanded to do a certain action, do not count each part of the action separately. So similarly to two before, sometimes there's a general mitzvah that has a lot of pieces to it. The example they give here is the mitzvah is they shall make me a sanctuary. This is written in Shemos, where Hashem says, build for me a mishkan, which was a preamble to the Beis HaMikdash that was going to build later. Now there's a lot of purpose. There's a lot of purpose. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of pieces to this mitzvah. You have to build this. You have to build that. You have to this construction, that construction, this piece of furniture, etc. But the mitzvah is to build a mishkan. All the different pieces that come to it. Some of them are individual mitzvahs, but for the most part, they are part of the general mitzvah of building a mishkan. Principle number 13. We do not count the amount of days a mitzvah is performed. This applies to many mitzvahs. For example, we're commanded to dwell in a sukkah for 7 days, or in outside of Israel, 8 days, right? It's not a separate mitzvah each of those days. It's not like day 1, there's the mitzvah to be in a sukkah. Day 2, there's a mitzvah to be in a sukkah. There's a mitzvah to be in a sukkah. This mitzvah impacts 7 or 8 days of your life. There is a mitzvah to keep Rosh Chodesh and to honor Rosh Chodesh and do whatever we do on Rosh Chodesh. There's not 12 separate counts for this. There's one mitzvah to keep Rosh Chodesh and to do whatever we do on Rosh Chodesh, bring up a sacrifice. This mitzvah applies to 12 days in the year. But interestingly, there's one mitzvah, maybe more, but the example that they bring down that actually, even though it seems similar each time, is considered a unique mitzvah. And this is the mitzvah of Musaf. Musaf is the extra sacrifice that we bring on special occasions, namely Shabbos and holidays. So yes, the Musaf that you bring up for Shabbos, that's one mitzvah, covers all the weeks of the year. But there's a special Musaf for Sukkot. There's a special Musaf for Yom Kippur. There's a special Musaf for Pesach. Each of those are individual mitzvahs because it's not just bring up a Musaf sacrifice and it applies to these holidays, but there's a specific Musaf for each holiday. So that's one instance where each Musaf is actually considered its own mitzvah. Principle number 14, the last one, we do not count the punishment administered for each transgression. So oftentimes, especially when it comes to the los ases, right? That's when you receive a punishment, not if you don't do a yes mitzvah, but if you don't do a mitzvah that you're not allowed to do, if you do the act, then there is a punishment for it, whether it's one of the capital punishments. There's 4 of those, which by the way, were very infrequent I think the Gemara says that if a court did a capital punishment 1 in 70 years, it was considered a cruel court. However, we still learn about them and we still learn from them. So let's say breaking Shabbos, you would get skila, right? And Torah says, if you do not keep Shabbos, you will get skila. That's not a separate mitzvah. The mitzvah is to keep Shabbos. Part of that detail, like all the other things, one of the details is a punishment that might come along with it. There's a more subtle punishment of lashes. That's oftentimes a punishment that they probably did do in the courts a lot. It's kind of like a warning punch. And again, it says often in the Torah, if you break this commandment, you will get lashes. That's not a separate detail. What is a mitzvah is that we give lashes when it applies. So there's a mitzvah to give lashes. When does it apply? When this is done, when this is done, when this is done, when this is done. There's a separate mitzvah to give skila. That's a punishment that is sometimes administered. That's one mitzvah. And when it applies, comes up in different times depending on when the mitzvah is. Okay, so we have finished the 14 principles that now we can, we've established, and now we can continue actually learning what the mitzvahs are. Excited to do this journey with you. 613 will be covered in under a year. Very exciting. And like I said before, the Rambam will reference these rules. So A, it's a foundation for us to understand, but B, they will come up again throughout our study. Have an amazing day. Happy mitzvahs.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.